it's fair to say that we are living in uncertain times. The pace of change around us is accelerating, and it's harder and harder to keep up with emerging trends and technology. And our customers, just like us, live and work in this world, and their expectations can change and do change just as rapidly, depending on different things like economic pressures and of course different life stages that they move through as well. And we know that their expectations are also constantly being shaped by the relationships they have with all of the different organisations that they interact with. And when they get a great experience in one industry or with one provider, they start to expect that wherever they go, regardless of whether they're interacting with their electricity provider, their bank, or their telco. And so how do we meet these expectations, and how do we keep up with these expectations when they change? And so keeping products and services aligned to customer goals and needs, it doesn't need to be reactionary or based on guesswork. And so in today's discussion, we're going to unpack how you can shine a light on what customers really value, so you can make decisions with more clarity and align what customers value with your business goals, which is a really exciting part of the discussion that I'm looking forward to diving into today with our two guests. But before I introduce them, I'm just going to recap on the three things that we said we'd cover today. So the one metric that I think everyone should be measuring, that will allow you to do more with less. It's a really great metric to track if you have operational costs or cost to serve pressures and challenges, which I know everybody does. And that metric is failure demand. So if anyone has heard of failure demand or has tracked that metric before, please give me a shout out in the chat to let me know, because I'm always curious to see how many people have heard of that metric before. For those that haven't heard of it before, Beck has. Excellent, thank you. Roughly around about 35% of all interactions that come into an organisation are driven by failure of some kind. And so it's a great place to start when you want to understand where the experience might be breaking down between customers. Thanks, Dorothy. You've heard of it before but haven't used it. The second thing that we said we'd cover is how do we bust myths about what customers really want, and to help you mitigate the risks of digital transformations, which have a very storied history of being unsuccessful. There's different numbers out there, but one I reference a lot is the McKinsey data that 80% of digital transformations fail to deliver on expectations. So how do we remove some of that guesswork so we really align our ambitions around digital with what customers want? And then the third one is how do we improve the accuracy of decision making? So linked to the second one, and using data and customer research so we know really where to place those bets to grow revenue. Thanks, Lisa. Same here as well. So now that I've set the stage for our conversation, let's introduce our guests. So Mel, hello, welcome back to Australia. You've been in the UK on holidays for a few weeks.
I have. Thank you, Sean. I'm excited to be here.
Very good. Good to have you. Mel's background, we worked together when Mel was at Breastscreen Victoria, and Mel there led the customer experience practice, the contact centre, community engagement and online presence, which included the website, social media and the online portal. And Mel has 15 years experience in the not-for-profit sector, leading large-scale initiatives at Cancer Council Victoria, Diabetes WA and Breastscreen Victoria to improve health and reduce inequity. And her experience spans chronic disease prevention and end-to-end program management. And right now, Mel is the Director of Operations and Community Engagement at ScaleWise, an SME advisory who guide businesses from startup to scale with governance frameworks, integrated management systems and board advisory to help SMEs achieve their unique strategic goals. So welcome, Mel.
Thank you.
And welcome along to Jess Miller from Custom Fleet. Jess has worked at Custom Fleet for 16 years, started in frontline operations, then moved into product management where she spent about 5 years, and then later moved into the novated leasing business. So if anyone needs a novated lease, go to Custom Fleet. There's some really good, I believe there's some really good incentives at the moment around EVs, which make novated leases pretty good. So anyway, that's a small sales pitch from me. And then Jess moved into a role in commercial excellence, had a career break to have her son, and then returned into an enterprise strategy role, and then finally into her current role as VP of Product, which Jess describes as the best role in the organisation, which I'll probably have to agree with that, Jess. And Jess is responsible for finding that sweet spot between what creates value for customers and what delivers commercial value for the organisation. And I think that's a really good segue into the conversation that we're going to have today. So, welcome, Jess.
Thank you, Sean. Really, really excited for the chat today. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Great to have you here. And thanks for everyone who has just joined. I know we had a couple of technical difficulties getting in, but it's great to have everyone along now. And I think someone's just joined who might be a bit of a failure demand expert. So we'll have to keep myself on my toes as we go through the conversation. So anyway, let's dive in. We've got a really good broad cross section of industries here today. We've got government, not-for-profit. We've got financial services, super, telco, healthcare, energy, transport, outsourcing, insurance, retail. We've almost got everything covered. So I would like to encourage everyone as we're going through the conversation today, if you have any questions or comments, please throw them in the chat, because I think with that diversity of representation we've got there, I'd be really keen to hear how people, what people think of the questions that we've got and any of the responses we have too. So we've got time to dive in and answer any of the questions you've got. And if there's anything that we can't answer, we can definitely take that offline and catch up with you separately to do that. So let's dive in. Mel, I'm going to start with you. Let's start at the start. So tell us about the problem that you were looking to solve.
Thank you, Sean. So I'm going to talk about my experience at Breastscreen Victoria and on a not-for-profit. I suppose the problem is always, or the question you were asked, is resourcing, creating efficiency. How can you do more with what you have? And I was managing the contact centre. So the contact centre at Breastscreen takes the bookings over the phone and responds to client inquiries. So there's also the online booking portal where clients can also book an appointment as well. So my goal, or what I wanted to understand, was what was going on for the client. I wanted to ensure that more clients could book online, so I could free up some of that resource in the contact centre so they can respond to the more complex client inquiries, and also then, move everyone else who can book online. If you can't book online, you're able to talk to a contact centre person. So that was my main problem, and that was what I was trying to understand, basically the correlation between the two things.
And I think that's quite a common challenge for many organisations these days, understanding the nature of the interactions that are coming in. And I think, and I've certainly been talking for maybe 15 years now about this, moving more complex or moving more simple transactions into more self-serve online sort of environments and focusing on the more complex. So hopefully everyone can relate to that challenge. Thanks, Mel. How about you, Jess? What was the problem you were looking to solve?
Yeah, so thanks, Sean. So I'll set a little bit of context first. So here at Custom Fleet, we've got two core goals. The first is to double revenue out to 29, so huge growth aspirations. And then that's coupled with a real desire to be the most customer-centric mobility partner as we go forward. So for us, I'll kind of bring that back to our business of today. We are a service-based business. So whilst we're a fleet management organisation and we fund vehicles, we also provide a host of fleet management services in life. And we're also a legacy business. So that comes with, complex processes that cut across multiple teams, multiple functions, multiple products. And some of that complexity, as I'm sure some of you might be able to appreciate, drives both cost and effort across our organisation, but also limits how fast we can actually grow, right? I think we've made several attempts over the years to try and transform and improve that from an outside out perspective, but that's really only got us so far. And as we push for this aspiration for growth, I think there was recognition that we're going to have to start to shift to take more of a customer-centric approach. And that's when we started to engage Sean and the Callow team to start to help us shift towards that customer perspective. And start to really try to fix what's broken from the outside in rather than the inside out.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Jess. And just for everyone, I've just relaunched the first poll because I think some people might have missed that one. So would love to hear your thoughts on the biggest challenge your organisation's facing right now as we're diving into the challenges that Mel and Jess faced. And I think I love the fact that you guys were thinking about your big aspirational targets and realising that looking outside in was the best way to try to shine a light on that. And I think there was a commonality between the work that we did with both you guys. We started with failure demand in both cases, and looking at the customer life cycle. So how does the relationship with your customers change over time, and where in those different stages of the relationship was the customer experience breaking down? So that was a really good place for us to start with you guys, both of you guys, to understand what was creating some of the challenges for your customers from an outside in perspective as well. So that's great. Really good perspectives to kick us off. Some of the other challenges people have highlighted here for their organisations: managing cost, budgets, reduced budget, customer centricity, budget for AI, budget for roles. So lots of cost drivers are challenges for people at the moment. Staffing limitations, managing cost, customer centricity, business centricity. I like that. Well, we're going to talk about how you can bring business and customer centricity together. So that's great. So big cost challenges, and so we did promise that we would talk about that today. So that's great. All right. Well, Mel, back to you. So thinking about your challenge that you were facing, what was the approach that you took to try and understand it?
And exactly what everybody just said: budget, moving towards AI, looking at online, the difference between the client experience and obviously the organisational goals as well. So really for me, and same as what Jess said in terms of complexity being that really core word, ours being the complexity of the client base. So Breastscreen's a population screening program, huge demographic and constantly changing demographic. So there's a cohort of people aging into the program, 40 to 50-year-olds, all the time. And not just myself, but the organisation making assumptions about that cohort and what their preference was. So particularly their ability to engage online, their digital competency, because there's an assumption that just because you're younger, you're automatically going to be better at using an online tool and that you're not going to be contacting our contact centre. So the reason I took the approach was to gain the evidence and stop working based on these assumptions. So I wanted to ensure that the online portal that was currently in place suited the needs of both our current client base and also meets the expectations of those clients that are aging in, to try to future-proof it, if you will.
Amazing. Thanks, Mel. And how about you, Jess?
Yeah,
what was the approach you took?
Yeah, so the approach we took was really to ground ourselves in customer research and customer journeys, which is when we partner with yourselves, Sean. So for us here at Custom Fleet, we are talking to customers all the time, right? We've got a high touch service model with relationship managers and account managers out in the field, and we're acting on that feedback. But for us, the approach to swing towards qualitative customer research was really about wanting to hear the voice of our customer in a systematic way, to really bring their voice into the room across all of our product journeys and really start to hear from our customers in their own words. We wanted to take a structured, evidence-based view, of what really matters to our customers. So what do they actually value from their own perspective? And I suppose that was really an effort to understand the why, right? So what is the why behind a customer's decisions, and at times, what is the why behind their frustrations, so that we can start to solve for that in a meaningful way. I think, as we heard some of those stories, right, and some of the feedback from customers, it was really a reminder for us that behind each of our SLAs, behind each of our policies, behind each of our processes, there's actually a real person. There's a real customer on the other side of that that's trying to get something done. So, it was grounded in research, it was grounded in journeys, and it was grounded in evidence and facts.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you both thought about shifting from assumptions to evidence. And I don't want to paint assumptions as being bad. We have to make assumptions all the time about how we the decisions that we make and how we want to run a business and design experiences for customers. But sometimes there comes a point where your assumptions can be a signal that you've reached the limit of your understanding. And I think for you guys, you'd kind of recognize you were at that point, and that research was really important for you to try to uncover, prove or disprove any of those hypotheses that you had or the assumptions that you had, and get the evidence to give yourself more clarity. The other thing I just wouldn't mind picking up on as well is that you both talked about the complexity of your customer bases, or at least differences, lots of differences that you were noticing in your customers. And I think that what that says is that for everyone, there's always known and unknown differences between your customers. Not all your customers will have the same needs and preferences. And you talked about one of those assumptions being the difference between young and old women and their sort of digital proficiency. And so we know that within our customer bases, there's always these meaningful differences between them. But how do you work out what those differences are, and what those behavioural differences are that drives customers to do things in different ways? And so I think that for anyone who's here with us in the audience, if you notice different behavioural, if you notice your customers behaving differently, so they're using channels in different ways, or they're using channels that you would prefer they didn't use, or they're interacting with your products in a way that doesn't quite work for them, or they're asking you to configure your products in a way that you haven't designed them for, that might indicate to you that there are some groups of customers out there, some patterns there to try and understand more deeply, that could actually have some benefit for you. There could be some unmet needs there, that there could be some revenue opportunities there, and certainly cost out opportunities, because if your customers are having trouble interacting with your products, they're probably going to be contacting you to tell you that, or choosing channels that you might not want them to use. So I think there's some real value there in moving from assumptions into evidence when it comes to understanding those nuances between your different customers. All right, cool. So let's dive into the second takeaway that we talked about today, which was how do we bust myths about what customers really want? I'm going to launch another poll. So I'm really curious to hear from everyone what their experiences have been with customer research, because we're going to dive into talking about that now. So as you guys go through and answer that next poll, Jess, I might start with you for this one.
Yep.
What did the research reveal for you guys?
Yeah, so look, the research was at times confronting, but in a positive way, right? So I think the research for us started to highlight gaps between how we thought things worked and how that actually felt for customers, or how customers were actually experiencing it on their side. So, I talked about the fact that we spend a lot of time with customers, right? And, we're deep in the work. And I think at times there's a view that we really understand customers, but the reality is that our own proximity to the work sometimes clouds that and creates an internal bias on that, right? I think the research gave us an opportunity to see that we are seeing client experiences through our roles and not necessarily through their reality, right? Sitting in the room, hearing the research played back to us, it gave us the opportunity to hear how customers actually describe their experiences, and that there was so much value in hearing that sentiment and direct feedback. And at times it also challenged us to actually step back and accept that the evidence is the fact, right? And how we feel is our perspective, and it's often clouded by our own experience. So I think there were certainly moments in the research that really landed for us, and I reflect on the playbacks, and there were moments where the room would just go absolutely quiet, and then there were rooms where there was just so much, the room got really loud. And I think that for me was a sign that the research was doing its job, because it was challenging us to think differently and have different conversations. So yeah, really, really valuable.
Yeah, it's great. It's, I think what you said there was really good about the organisations, or you guys are always interacting with customers, but you don't always know exactly the experience they're having beyond those touch points that you have with them. There's a lot also that's going on behind the scenes that gets revealed through research as well, which is as meaningful in terms of what creates value for them as the things that you experience in those customer touch points that you have. That's great. Thanks, Jess. What about you, Mel? What did the research reveal for you guys?
Look, that was Jess's exactly the same as Jess in terms of, an understanding that we've got a comprehensive CX and we're really in touch with our clients and we hear from them all the time. But it just showed this fundamental gap between what we intended to do and the impact that it was having. So I think this is a common thing. You think something's happening or you think something's going really well from an operational point of view, but it may not necessarily match the actual experience of the customer or the client. So our CX program, as I said, pretty amazing. And it told us how clients were satisfied and definitely where there was room for feedback. And we got a lot of data. But what this showed me was the actual limitations of CX. And therefore, when research became a really important part of that complementary process and how it gave us more information, because the data that I had in my CX program could not answer the actual question that I had. And it told me what was happening, but it didn't tell me enough about the why. So I knew that people were calling the contact center, but I couldn't figure out why they weren't booking online. So this is where the research made the difference. Hearing the actual experience and the story and the UX and the understanding of what the portal was doing and hearing it from the client's perspective helped us see what they actually valued most, not what we thought the most important part of that process or that journey or that interaction actually was. And what it did for me was help me identify if I'm going to change one small thing, if I'm going to actually do one thing, what thing would that be that would have the greatest impact on the client, in their words, based on what they value. So, and as you can imagine, it's a very large organization, lots of competing priorities. And I think, this is quite common based on, people have got many different projects happening and there's lots of complex decision-making processes. But having evidence to support piece of work that you want to do or a change that you want to make makes a massive difference. And that's what this research provides. So it did bust those myths around what the client's preference was and the assumptions that we were making. But what it did for me also was shape that our CX tool and, anything sitting alongside that is absolutely essential to help us mitigate risks and also to help our organisation achieve what we've written down as a goal and what we wanted to actually do. And it focused us and our attention on the right thing because, and I think this happens all the time, when you think you're doing research, and Jess made this point as well, people get quite cautious about research because sometimes it's not always what you want to hear, and they can also feel like there'll be this enormous list of things that you then have to tackle, and I really see that as not necessarily the case. I think it shows you the one thing you can fix that will make a difference, and that's what it did for us, rather than having to fix everything. It focuses your attention where it's supposed to be. And that's what it did for us.
That's awesome. There's a couple of things there that I'd love to unpack a bit further. I think that the piece you said about metrics. So obviously, I'm sure everyone here measures the customer experience in some way. Maybe use things like CSAT or NPS, maybe other metrics as well. But research is a really great way to shine a light on what's going on behind that number. Those aggregated metrics can sometimes hide a lot of meaning, and so research is a really great way to complement those measures. So those quantitative measures are really important. I think qualitative research and quantitative data together are really valuable, and I think we'll get into unpacking that a little bit more as we go on. All right, amazing. Thanks, Mel. So the second poll, we're about 50-50 on using research and just assumptions alone. That's really interesting. I wasn't sure where that number would come out, but so 50% on assumptions, and then a split between using research when you see unexplained changes in customer behaviour and gaps in your understanding. So that's pretty good, 50-50. Thank you, everyone. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those into the chat. We'd love to hear any questions at all that you guys have. Okay, so let's get into the third takeaway that we had. So how, and Mel, you touched on this, how does this approach improve the accuracy of decision making? So yeah, Mel, over to you.
Keep going. People are going to get sick of the sound of my voice. No, I think, look, really, it provides direction, as I said, sort of just now. From an executive perspective, and this is really where I was sitting, it's difficult to prioritize work that isn't linked to your strategic plan or your annual work plan or whatever that looks like in your organization. And for me, this whole process allowed me to coordinate those priorities across the organisation and influence the decision-making with that actual evidence and data that I had. And look, I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone in here, but I wasn't building, coding an online portal. But it gave me the tool that I needed to be able to brief in that piece of work, but also prove that it was going to have an impact. So I had the evidence, I had the language, I had the exact information that I needed to be able to prioritize a piece of work, make it really clear that we were not taking on this huge, costly project that was going to, be really problematic across the organisation, but was something small, something evidence-based, something really particular, focused, direct, and that's what people are looking for. Efficiencies that are not going to cost a lot of money, that don't necessarily need to change your entire operations, but are going to have an impact. And we know it's going to have an impact because that's exactly what the client has told us. And that's the value to them. So they are saying to us, if you do this one thing, it's going to make a huge impact to our ability to interact with you, our accessibility in accessing your service, my ability to return to that service, all of the things that we want, all of the things that we have goals for. And it's very difficult when you have that information for people to not be able to say, absolutely, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah. So it really helps to sharpen your focus on where it is you should be focusing or investing. And I think it also helps to shine light, as we said before, on the experience you're actually having. So probably what you haven't talked much about is the research allows you to actually build a picture out of the journey that customers are taking, and customer journeys are something that I'm sure everyone here has heard of before. So the research helps reveal the journey, and then whereabouts in that journey the most meaningful places are for them, or where things might not be going to plan for customers based on the goals they're trying to achieve.
I think if you've mapped your journey, Sean, a lot of people think, oh yeah, I've got my customer journey, I understand what that looks like. But there's always more you can learn and add to that journey. And so if you've got your CX, you think you understand that, you've got your CX, you've got your customer journey, these bits of research actually strengthen and improve both of those things. So you might be able to, in addition, make tweaks to your CX, make tweaks to your customer journey, touch points that you didn't know, or you could potentially add in. So it's really valuable.
Yeah. I think the journey from the perspective of the customer is the most important thing, filling in those gaps, because there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes for customers before they even interact with the organisation that research can help reveal, that are really meaningful steps in that journey as well. That's great. So Jess, would love to hear from you on that point as well, but the research that you did was the foundation for a customer experience framework that you've started to build out. So can you tell us a bit about that framework and how you see that enabling better decision making for Custom Fleet?
Yeah, absolutely. So the customer experience framework, which was really a culmination of the research and the product journeys, right, into an overarching framework that really translated the insights into an actionable tool for us. So the customer experience framework itself started to map out the key moments that matter in our product journeys, and starts to enable us to link performance metrics and customer sentiment to that. And so it's starting to create a system for us in terms of decision making and prioritisation. When we started on this journey, one of the things I kept saying was, I don't want to invest in these customer journeys and get to the end and then have them collect dust on someone's desk, or kind of have these customer journeys be hidden in someone's network drive. I really want to make sure that these journeys live beyond. And so the experience framework that Sean, you supported us with, enables us to do that, right? It's this living dynamic system that we can start to really work through where customer value sits and where business value sits, and where those 2 points intersect. And I think you described that as the sweet spot, Sean, in your opening. That's where we really want to prioritise our investment effort, and it enables us to do that with confidence. So the other side of that is, and Mel, you talked around, the executive team, right? The CX framework takes away some of the noise and some of the subjectivity in decision making, and it enables the executive team to really align on what is important to our customers, what is important to our business, and we can start to make decisions with confidence. So I think now we know what matters, we know why it matters, and then from there we get faster decision making, which is going to be really critical for us to realise our aspirations for growth in the immediate term.
That's a great summary, Mel, Jess, of that framework. Is that like I think you said it's a system, like an information system almost of research, and then the visualization of the customer journeys. So those journeys from the perspective of the customer, and then overlaying onto that some of those other metrics that we spoke about, the quantitative data, both customer data, whether it's NPS, CSAT, but also business metrics as well. What are the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve to help you find that alignment? Where do those cross over to show you, to your point, Mel, where do we focus? So now we have the research which shows us what the journey looks like, and we have metrics that tell us at the different stages where are the most important places to focus effort. So that's where we're trying to bring that clarity to the decision making that I spoke about before, but being able to use research and data to be able to do that. But awesome. All right. Well, we're going great for time. Jono, thanks for your comment in the chat there about customer journey maps. Love that. If anyone else has any comments or questions, throw those in as well. Next question I've got for you is for you, Mel. How does the work that you did help to reduce some of the risk in decision making, particularly around where you want to save cost or make decisions about growing revenue?
Yeah, great. I mean, I will put my hand up to say that, before I started looking at a CX program and working in this space, I mean, the correlation between it really around risk management didn't even enter my brain. You're like, I've got to make sure that I'm delivering what the client wants, and operationally, how is it going to help me? But it's just so incredibly clear to me that it is just essential to managing risk, and that is managing risk across the whole organisation, not just in decision making. So you can imagine in a large organisation with a lot of feedback, huge feedback systems and complaints processes and accessibility considerations for 50 sites across Victoria, you've got a lot of risk to manage. So the CX program, immediately you're managing, it allows you to identify reputational risks, compliance risks. Are we sending out information that's misleading or incorrect? That's where you'll hear that first. Accessibility, system risks. So what are the internal processes that we're doing that are not working? How is technology working? Where is it failing for the client? People risks. So are our staff actions and behaviours unintentionally affecting our clients and our customers? So you've got all of this information, and the CX program is just absolutely integral to managing all of those risks and ensuring that you've got visibility of that data to feed up to the executive team. Of course, I've already talked about challenging our assumptions constantly by looking at this data. But really, in terms of decision making, it reduces the risk of investing in an area that doesn't align with the client need or an expectation. So, that is just the main thing that you are, and we've already talked about it and just covered it really well in terms of you've got the client value and what the client values and what the business values. And then in the middle, you've got your organizational goals, you've got trying to manage risks for the organizations, you've got trying to manage innovation and operational and everything that you want to do, your growth, your costs, your budget, all of these things. So the correlation between the two is where you come together in the middle, and you have how is what we're delivering matching our client experience, and how can we learn more about that to mitigate risk. And really, for me, I think wherever you're not meeting expectations is where your complaints are going to spike. And that is something that I feel like I just learned again and again and again and again and again. And even in decision making, you've got internal expectations, you've got internal assumptions, you've got all of those things. And again, when we're not meeting those expectations and people are not taking into consideration all of that data, that's where the wrong decision is being made.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. I think that there is a real opportunity to use CX metrics to help reduce risk across the organisation, or shine a light on where those risks are. I'm not sure, as Lisa's saying, she truly loves that way of thinking about it. I'm curious if anyone else here thinks about managing risks in that way as well, because I think that really things like operational risk, any kind of risk that your organisation is facing, should tie back to some sort of there should be something in it for the customer as well. Obviously, you're managing risk for a reason. I think using CX metrics and research can really help build strong cases for managing risk as well, if you don't already have that. Amazing. All right. Lovely. I've got one more poll that I want to launch now, and curious where everyone is thinking about investing over the next 12 months. We're talking a lot about how customer research and journeys can help to sharpen up focus and on where you should be investing. So curious about where organisations are looking to invest next year. So let's give people a chance to let us know where their investments are there. And if there's anything there that I haven't got, if I've missed a category, feel free to throw that in the chat as well. Let us know. And it's all anonymous too, so feel free to you can answer this one, and we won't know exactly who you are and where you're investing, if that is a concern for you.
We'll hold you to it and follow up with you and check that you really invested there.
Yeah, that's right. Or making sure that it aligns to what you answered in the first poll, but we're not going to do any of that stuff. All right. So what do you got coming through? So digitization, automation, about 20%, enhancements or improvements in existing products, 20%, AI, 13%. I thought that would be a lot higher. It's going down to 11. Interesting. Risk and compliance, 11. So lots around digitization, automation. Awesome. So I'd say, I mean, a great case in point for research. I think another really great stat that I've read when it comes to digital transformations is a lot of the reasons behind organizations transforming, doing digital transformations is driven by cost in the first instance, and then they look for ways to automate or digitize things that they do. But I think the trap some organizations fall into is that they think about it from an internal perspective. How do we make things more efficient for ourselves? Not necessarily thinking about, does that efficiency translate to how customers actually want to do things? And I certainly hear lots and lots about channel switching, and that I think comes from not really understanding how customers are trying to do things online and creating pathways for them that don't really align to the goals that they've got. So absolutely would recommend making sure you've got a customer lens on any digitization and automation. That's a tough one to say on a Friday afternoon. So yeah, definitely a good case for research there. Amazing. Jess and Mel, thank you so much for your time today. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with before I wrap things up?
Jess?
I'd probably just wrap by saying that for me, kind of going into this work with partnering with Callow, it was really around trying to get the balance of customer centricity and our growth aspirations right. And I think the research, the journeys, the CX framework, all of that's culminated in a tool, right, for us that we can now start to use to prioritise, drive our decision making with confidence, but also make decisions around what it is that we're going to do and equally what we're not going to do. So I think it's given us a real confidence to go forward and make the investments in the critical areas that we know are going to drive value for us go forward. So and really set us up for the future. So yeah, it's
Awesome.
been invaluable from that perspective.
That's great. Great recap, Jess. Thank you.
For me, I think, and I suppose even thinking about working in my current role at the moment at Scalewise, where we're looking at individual businesses and looking at improvements that they can make and how they can create efficiencies. You know, we're just constantly having a conversation about proactively resolving issues, and that's going to ultimately in the long term reduce cost. But the other part is doing these deep dive projects, and I think that, you know, doing these pieces of research in addition to that CX data that you've already got can uncover unmet needs. You know, there's actually a lot of information in there around an unmet need that your customer base has that can then provide you an opportunity to create new business and actually give you insight into what your clients want from you that perhaps you're not already providing. And that's the advice that we always provide. Like, if there's something you don't know, you're actually going to learn a whole bunch of things that you didn't even know you needed to know. And that's, I think, a space for when you're in uncertain times and when we're not sure where we're going and we really are trying to reduce cost, but we always want to grow because businesses always want to grow. This research provides you opportunities you don't even know you're going to necessarily get. And I think, like, definitely we got that from the research at Breastscreen, and any piece of research that I've seen has always had those little gems that you don't know you're going to find. And, you know, you could be creating a new product or a new service or a new offering that's giving you a revenue or an income stream that you just didn't anticipate. Or you're going to just make that small tweak that's going to make an enormous difference to your client at the end of the day. So that's sort of the summary from me. I think that there's just huge opportunity in doing these little bits of research.
Thanks, Mel. I agree. I think revealing what you don't know is as valuable as validating the things that you set out to learn in the research. And certainly, I've always seen both revenue and cost out opportunities as well, particularly when you look at things like failure demand. So let's wrap up. So the key takeaways. First one, tracking failure demand, looking for those the good starting point is to find where in the experience those breakdowns are occurring, and failure demand is a great place to start, and then expanding on that. So furthering your investigation with research, going from assumptions to evidence, to help really reveal the real journey customers are taking, the goals they've got as they take those steps along that journey, and then overlaying that with data. So using your internal business data, your risk data, customer metrics to really find where are those critical moments that matter for customers, to align both your customer goals and your business goals. Because when you can do that, I think it was actually your term, Jess, finding that sweet spot. When you find that sweet spot, you have that focus, and so, you know, you're really investing with much more certainty at that point as well. So that's the wrap. I have an offer for everyone who's here today. We're currently in the process of developing a free online CX framework assessment, and at the end of completing it, you'll get a customized report with recommendations. So we're in beta testing for that at the moment. So if there's anyone here who would like to participate in that testing, the report probably only take about 15 minutes to complete, but at the end of it, you get a free 1 hour consultation with us to debrief the results. So I'll send a summary email out after this with the recording and some of the key takeaways, and I'll put a link in there if anyone's keen to participate in that or learn more. That'd be great. All right, thank you so much for everyone for coming along. I hope you enjoyed that. Would love to hear any feedback you've got. Feel free to email me. And thank you so much to my guests, Jess and Mel. You did great. Hope you enjoyed yourself as well. Getting some rounds of applause there as well.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Sean. That was
Cheers.
fantastic.
Great work, Mel. Cheers.
See you guys. Bye.